For much of the 20th century, Burrard Inlet was home to a community of squatters living in houseboats, floating shacks, cabins, and foreshore cottages lifted onto pilings. At their height in the 1930s and 40s, squatter communities in Vancouver were home to over 1,000 people, mostly living without electricity, running water, or plumbing. According to Scott Watson, squatting in the intertidal zone is as old as Vancouver and is an important part of the history of the city. Waterfront squatters' communities evolved in the Vancouver area for various reasons, including poverty and unemployment, adjacency to workplaces, rebellion against social conventions, and a yearning for an unfettered way of life in harmony with nature. The Inlet's most celebrated squatter was Malcolm Lowry, who lived on the Dollarton shores from 1940 to 1954. His community was first inhabited by fishermen and employees of the nearby Dollar Mill in an area we now know as North Vancouver's Kate's Park. These were some of Lowry's most productive years, where he wrote much of his classic novel Under the Volcano. According to historian Daniel Francis, squatters have been part of the urban scene in Vancouver for a long time. The term is often used in a pejorative sense, but squatters, despite their marginal lifestyle, have been productive members of the community, holding jobs, raising families, and, in Lowry's case, writing great literature. This is also true for the residents of the Watchman's Cabin, the last existing structure of its kind. For almost 50 years, since 1966, one of the region's foremost experimental artists, Al Neal, lived there. The cabin and its foreshore land were also a home and muse for 35 years to Neal's partner, noted artist Carole Itter, who worked and produced art in and around the cabin beginning in the 1970s. Surrounding the site and in the trees are significant artworks co-created over the decades by Al Neal and Carole Itter. These assemblages drape the site and surround and inhabit the landscape as well as the cabin itself. Although Al Neal lived off the grid, he lived there with the permission of the McKenzie Barge owner and was considered the beach watchman. In 2005, Alexandra Vardy described a visit to Al Neal's cabin. After taking a hidden woodland trail to his rough cabin, perched on top of a small permanently beached barge, seemed as much houseboat as house, we drank tea and discussed art and music to the accompaniment of his cat, making its delicate way across the keys of a battered upright piano. The sun lit up Neal's flotsam assemblages just as surely as the pianist's wayward yet erudite conversation illuminated the idea that it is possible to build a life around constant exploration. For that lesson, I'll always be thankful, as will the thousands of others who learned it under this madman, mystic, and living legend's tutelage. A World War II veteran born in 1924, Al Neal is an artist, sculptor, writer, and jazz pianist who began playing in Vancouver clubs in the late 1940s. He was a central figure in the 50s and 60s at the Cellar Club, where he performed with the Al Neal Quartet and dozens of other musicians. Following his time at the Cellar, Neal pioneered a wholly unique and unusual improv free jazz style and released several recordings which were reissued in the 80s and 90s. He's also known for his writing, visual art, multimedia performances in the 70s, and mixed media collages from the 80s. In 2014, he received the prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award at the Mayor's Arts Awards in Vancouver, which recognizes, quote, an individual who has made significant contributions over his or her lifetime to the cultural vibrancy of the city. For almost 5 decades, he divided his time between Vancouver and the foreshore cabin at Dollarton. Carole Itter, born in 1939, is a sculptor, filmmaker, performance artist, and writer with awards from the Canada Council for the Arts and the British Columbia Arts Council. Much of Itter's artistic works as an experimental artist involve found objects and natural materials. Her opposition to consumer culture is a common thread throughout her work. She's become well known for installations and performances where she carefully crafts recycled materials with striking environmental resonance. The stretch of shoreline on the inlet was a plentiful source of materials that she incorporated into decades of visual and structural works, including a series of films inspired by and shot on location at the cabin. The cabin's structure itself had a storied history. Vince Mason, one of the oldest workers at McKenzie Barge Derrick, said it had been built by a Scandinavian craftsman and was originally moored in Cole Harbour. When its builder got a job at McKenzie Barge, he had the cabin towed to its new location near Kate's Park and lifted on the pilings. In September 1966, Ralph McKenzie offered the cabin to Al Neal and on his moving in provided him with a single electrical cord from the shipyard, which remained the only power source over the years. All supplies, including food, water, and of course the cabin's piano, had to be carried through the woods down a narrow trail to the water's edge. Over the past 100 years, the cabin's idyllic site has undergone profound transformation. In 2015, the land adjacent to the cabin, McKenzie Barge and Shipbuilding, was sold to Polygon Homes for redevelopment, and it began its next transformation into the sprawling upscale residential community, Kate's Landing. 80 years after the cabin was originally moved to the beach, and almost 50 years after Al Neal moved in, he received another notice, this time a notice of trespass, requiring the cabin to be moved off the beach so the highly contaminated industrial land could be remediated for the new development. A small group of friends, acquaintances, and colleagues of Al's and Carole's began discussing possibilities and various ways to save the cabin. National and local Vancouver media outlets picked up the story and shone a spotlight onto this previously unknown historical structure.
There was a time when such a view wasn't worth $1 million. When living on the edge of Burrard Inlet, albeit in a shack, was cheap, perfect for struggling artists.
I think it was a rich life here, just of people who had a place to hide in some ways, or had a place that was outside the city, that was close to the city, and a very beautiful place.
The arts community is banding together to find the money and the place, because it's about more than a building. It's about history.
Well, you know, now I'm 75. My partner Al Neal is 90. We've had a time here, but at the same time, if something could happen to the cabin itself in terms of preservation, we would be very happy.
Over 3 days in July 2015, the Blue Cabin was picked up off its pilings and moved to its new temporary home a few kilometers down Dollarton Highway. Support has been given by a host of organizations and people, including the Citizens Committee of Port Metro Vancouver, Polygon Homes, Supreme Structural Transport, Connexus, and PM volunteers. The Watchman's Cabin is the last of hundreds of small dwellings that once dotted the shores of Burrard Inlet and provided homes for many marginalized people, including laborers, seniors, artists, and many other countercultural visionaries who are among those who worked, lived, and created art in squatters' cabins spread along this jurisdictional gray zone that separated water from land. The cabin has strong cultural, historic, and artistic value and is a highly symbolic building that tangibly connects us to a now vanished way of life, when people could live off the grid within the bounds of a rapidly urbanizing metropolitan area.
There is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs worn by all of dust. This is a place where I don't feel this is a place where I feel like home.
Thank you. There's a lot of people who come in. Can we get extra chairs for them?
Or people can move up to the top.
If anybody's under 30 and wants to sit on the floor. Just do it.
Yeah, totally cool. Yeah, no, that's super slick. Oh, totally good.
There's one chair over here, right beside me. Just one here. You all want to miss that one. If you all move down one, you can probably get out easier. If you all move down one.
Good.
Can we turn off the projector for the next little part? Turn off.
I can put the lens on.
Because then I'll have to restart. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Most people kind of comfortable. I feel like I gotta go like this sort of to Krista and I, to back up a bit, I was asked who spent a lot of time out at the cabin with Al and I, and would they like to sit? And I thought for a long time, we hardly saw, we were real recluses. We had, on rare occasions, not a lot of you two came, but mostly we were there alone. And then I thought, my gosh, Krista and I worked together. We collaborated for maybe 2 years or more on different things. And she was the one who got the honorary key and everything else. I don't think you ever used it, but she was.
I knew where it was though.
Yeah, yeah, and it was such a, to me, such a phenomenal collaboration. And you started working with Al. At one point, Al, who was always very direct with his words, he said to me, you weren't there, he said, out of nowhere, he said, Krista is my daughter. And he didn't say, like my daughter, he said, Krista is my daughter. And I thought, wow, what a lovely thing, it's just, it was true. So, having said that about you, now you have to say nice things.
Well, that's easy. Well, I guess when I started working with, it was initially Al Neal that I was going to be working with. Glenn Altine had asked if I could work with Al in this retrospective on his art. And so immediately Carole and I started working, going through slides and going into the basement, and she took me into all of her archives, which was amazing. And so we ended up doing most of the work together on Al's retrospective. And so yeah, I got this inside look into Carole Itter's archives and meticulously organized slides and going back decades. It was just amazing to just see the process and get to be invited into that process. And I think we actually worked together from, it was about 2005 to 2015.
Oh.
It spanned that far, I think, yeah. Lots of stuff.
Yeah. To my mind, collaborating with an artist has just been part of my whole life, and I think as a younger artist, you're in there mentoring with older artists, and as an older artist, you're so grateful to see younger artists who are interested. I do make the age differential here, because there is that between us, although I didn't sense it too much at the time, but it's just been a fact of my life, and I think most artists know it too. It was just, we had so much fun. When I wanted to make there's a little bit of a scene there, and there's me rowing a boat and pulling a tarpaulin as well. I wanted to make a short film, and Krista said, sure, and I think you had a wetsuit. I got you a wetsuit.
Oh, yeah.
And
a full wetsuit.
And a nice camera that she owned then that she was holding above her head.
Yeah.
And the film is about 5 minutes long. There's plans to show it coming up pretty soon, so you didn't see it all. But we talked it over, and then what the intent was, and what I'm ostensibly doing is rowing that mass of tarpaulins down the inlet toward the garbage dump. And then it takes apart, yeah, it takes apart and rolling it up and then dumping it, and it takes about 5 minutes. And she was so brave because she was in water like chest deep and holding this camera up, and the beach was not a solid sort of sandy beach, it was rocky, and she was trying her best not to fall over, because actually you had the camera on long-term loans and so and this is how we constantly work. I'd say, well, I think we should climb down Burnaby Mountain and get the sound of a train, and Krista would say, sure! And we did that on another film. And do you remember?
Climbing deep down into the mountains with our audio gear that we rented from Long McQuaid to get the perfect train sound. Yeah. And we didn't get any trains.
And if we did it today, we'd be arrested because we were very close to Kinder Morgan.
Oh yeah, now
know that then, but I just, you have so much energy, and you just said sure to everything, so.
Just how I got myself into so many weird situations. Running up the dock in a wetsuit with the camera while there's all the bros with their speedboats that want to go out speedboating. Hold on, wait, we're making a film. So here comes Carole. They're tarp, and they're like, what's that? So we're holding off these guys with their like skidoos and stuff. I mean,
It was our only audience.
because we wanted that shot of you going under, and I had to be up on top of the boat dock to get that shot.
Yeah.
So hold on, everyone.
Yeah.
And so they're watching, going, what's going on?
Yeah, yeah. And I remember having to slow down on the rowing because I needed you to have time to get out of the water and climb up onto the wharf or the dock that went out. And as I slowed down on the rowing, the whole tarpaulin was sinking. You know, this is good collaboration, coordinating something like this. And during the whole row over, I would say, what is it, about 1,000 feet? I'm not sure. And we never intentionally measured it. But during that time, there wasn't a soul on the beach. There was utterly no audience, except one dog that was barking at us. And so Krista, of course, had the audio going, and she's got the dog in the barking away. And she's going, it's perfect.
Yeah, we planned it that way.
You planned it. She set the dog up. But I think possibly it was me who said, let's do it all in one take. And I think in hindsight, we probably should have done it in 2 or 3 takes. Because there was those limits that you have when you're doing something like this all in one shot. It takes a lot of...
But then we had a lot of B-roll to work with. All of the tendrils of the tarp in the surf.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of that, so that was a great place to put that in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
to break it up. But yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. And then the end of it, well, I won't give away the end. But you're like, what happens? I forget. She rows the whole thing over and then brings the whole thing up the boat launch. And then you dismantle it very carefully and throw the whole thing in the garbage.
Yeah. Everybody lost interest in me, you know.
That was the funniest thing ever. Because I didn't really know what, I was like, okay, Carole, I'm ready, let's do this. And I was just following you. And then, poof, everything in the dumpster.
Yeah. Yeah. And the origin of the tarpaulins was around the woodpile. We kept the woodpile near the cabin. And it's the story of our lives. Al would put a tarpaulin over it, and the tarpaulin would gradually crumble and fall down. And then 2 years later, another tarpaulin, and it would crumble. Well, after about 30 years of this, you have a ring of rotten tarpaulins around a huge woodpile, and I thought, oh, I must do something with this. So on the low tides for about a month, I would lay out the different ragged tarpaulins and figure out how to mend them and sew them back together. And I was doing this before you came up with the camera, and I'm having such a good time. And then it came to me that we should film some of this, you know. But most of that part is undocumented, so it's just in my memory. But when we were collaborating, how did we feel?
Great. Yeah. It was so much fun being able to, because I was seeing just, like I said before, the behind the scenes of how you were making projects. And I started to learn all the things I was doing wrong. Doing things so quickly, like, you know, trying to be digitally, everything so fast, cutting things together. And then watching Carole work, just very delicate, pre-planning, storyboards. Everything was so meticulously planned, and then came together exactly as she had hoped. And it was like a magical process. So it was really neat watching you. So I was learning and just watching this whole thing unfold at the same time. It was awesome. Yeah.
I should say, in the last few years, Krista's been in the big film business, not working with artists. I mean, you don't make a living
Right.
as an artist, and it must be a whole different story there.
Well, that's where I learned to go fast, 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 deadline, deadline.
Yeah.
You're learning, okay, you have, you're briefed on something to create, and it's playing on a screen the next day. So you have absolutely no time to think it through, you just hit the ground running. And so with these projects, all this time to, you know, contemplate and think and evolve ideas. It's amazing. And then to see the finished product, yeah. So it was really neat to just sort of tag along and watch all of these things unfold. Yeah, it was really, really cool.
The second one we collaborated on, can I tell the story of that? And it's called The Inlet, and some of you have seen it, and it's certainly relates to a lovely feeling I have toward that Gerard Inlet. Krista said, well, no, I'm not going to stay here for all of this. Here's the camera. We rented it for 7 weeks, big camera. She said, here's the manual. It was like 143 pages. I couldn't understand a word. She said, well, if you can run a 35 millimeter Pentax, and I can, she said, you can run this thing. And she probably showed me the stop and start, and white flash. I never understood what white flash was.
Oh, white balance?
White balance,
Right.
yeah, I just couldn't follow that. So this camera was set up on a tripod, and it was, maybe some of you have seen it, and it filmed initially of items going by on the water, boats, kayakers, oil tankers, you know, and it was just a stationary camera, and I had a great imagination that it would all be in the same light and the same focus. Everything else, and nothing worked really. You know, the tanker would be going by on a cloudy day, and it was the first tanker I'd seen in 14 days, so it filmed it anyway. Krista took the whole thing into her computer and brought it up, I suppose you could say. Long edit of it.
Well, just these huge long clips of nothing.
Yeah.
And then a tanker goes by. So I had Carole make a sign that said, I think, train and tanker on a yellow piece of paper, I think, or something. So that when one was coming, she could just hold that in front of the camera and drop it. So when I'm zipping through these hours of footage, oh, train, got it. And then I cut that piece out. So because they come so slowly, the tankers are going. So you know it's coming for like an hour. And so you just go sit with your sign, and I could find it and edit. It worked pretty well. But no, every single time you did catch one, it's a sunny day, or all the trees are now facing this way, or every shot was different.
Yeah.
But we wanted them to run together seamlessly. So I did end up taking one of the best shots with like the trees were just the right way, and then photoshopping this frame so that the center tanker action would match. It's tricky, but it...
Yeah, it was an awful lot of work on your part. This is my 4th film, and I broke my rule that I was never going to handle a movie camera.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't do well.
And we left it out there for a long, it would stay set up.
No, I
in the proper
hauled it
space.
back and forth all the
Okay.
time because it was so valuable.
Oh, in your knitting
Couldn't
bag.
be left in the cabin, yeah.
In your knitting bag.
In my knitting bag, yeah.
She'd have this expensive camera in her bag with just knitting on top, so no one would think to steal it. Genius. What else did we make?
Yeah. Certainly you've made a lot of, you're the person who filmed an awful lot of video of the assemblages out there, and there will be one assemblage I'll be addressing in a little while, and you started with Al, with him, so yeah.
Well, I shot a lot, and I think a lot of it came from going out to the cabin, we pack sandwiches, drive out to the cabin, Al read his paper, we have tea, go collect water from the creek, and then in that time, I'll just shoot a few things. So I was always wandering around the camera, taking pictures, and let's use that for this next project. So we would always pull from those. They weren't shot specifically for anything, we would pull from those later to make into projects. Yeah. Lots of that stuff. Lots of it in 4x3, it was that long ago.
4x3 means what?
4x3, standard def.
Right.
So we were shooting stuff out there before, well, you were probably shooting film out there before even digital, but the leap from SD to HD happened while shooting out there.
Yeah.
So that's how long back it was.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was just totally out of date. But, yeah.
Can I ask how the location influenced your work?
totally, all the time. And same for Al, too, yeah. Yeah, and this was something about the cabin being in that place that was so remarkable. I spent most of my time outdoors, sitting on the deck, looking, and just to have that kind of time was just so freeing, you know, and also really, I don't think I ever knew, living anywhere else in my life, such contentment as I knew there, yeah. And also inspiration, if you want to use that word.
Do you have a sense of the history of the location?
I have a sense of the history of it.
Of the location, yeah.
Well, I certainly read Lowry while I was there. I read his Forest Path to the Spring, and could kind of identify the trees and the rocks. And Frances Duncan, a writer of short stories and prose, I read her. There weren't any other squatters' cabins when I was out there. There hadn't been a string of them along there. But, fortunately, this cabin was somewhat attached to the shipyard. It was in a skitsy kind of place in a way, because you looked out to the southeast and you saw this incredible inlet and mountain view. We're looking southeast toward Burnaby Mountain, you could say. And right next to us was this great big shipyard, and the auditory sounds out of it were a little overwhelming at times. We'd sometimes have to evacuate. And when they were sandblasting, there was air quality was just so bad that sometimes we'd have to leave. You know, I mean, there's a lot of romanticism to imagining it, but there were times when it was almost inhabitable. It was well built, and it wasn't exactly winterized, and we had a wood stove in there, which was the center of the place. I'm losing track here. Tell me your
That's fine, I'm just kind of curious about
yeah.
the influence of the location and the cabin and your situation, how it influenced your work.
Yeah,
The
very,
geese especially.
very much. And the geese, yeah, I'll speak to the geese too. And this young fellow here, he's a friend of Krista's, and he, when she described me to him, called me Super Bruce. Thank you.
Was the mud flats connected with this? I visited the mud flats a long time
It's
ago, and I
about
just wondered.
a mile kind of north,
Okay,
or that's not
That's
quite
the-
called north there.
and what linkage did you have with them? Because this was a very fascinating environment, the mud flats.
No, I didn't know the mud flats whatsoever. They weren't there when I was there. They
Okay.
had been, is the word razed or razed or something, burned down.
Oh, I see.
A little
So
bit
you came
before that.
after.
It was Al who knew them, and he
Okay.
had a canoe at the time, and he'd sometimes canoe back and
All
forth.
right.
But the homes were going in on that waterfront land when I was there. Do you know it from an earlier time?
Oh, yeah, I know the mud flats quite well.
Yeah.
I was very fascinated by the structures that were built and very eclectic and basically whatever, but the community spirit was very powerful.
Wasn't
I
it?
remember.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, amongst the various ones there. Good to know that Al had a connection with them.
Yeah, he knew most of them, but I mean, they were all, he was a recluse. He lived very much
Yep.
alone, yeah.
And they were all recluse, the ones in the
In their
mud
ways,
flats.
yes.
Did you live there in the winter time also, or
We
basically
were
summer?
certainly there all through the winter. I just remember him getting up twice in the night to start the fire again. It got that cold. We had the alternative, because I had central heating, I was popular in Strathcona neighborhood. So if it dropped down really cold, we wouldn't stay overnight. Yeah. We were there, and he had 2 cats there, and I had 2 cats in Strathcona neighborhood. And sometimes I just thought we were running between both places, feeding cats, stroking them and stuff. How they manage a house and take over. We were there nearly half the time.
But it was almost like all of the assemblage art around
Yes, I got lots of
made it
pictures of
seem
that.
like the space,
Yeah.
this is the area you shouldn't enter, sort of thing,
Yeah.
I found. So people would sort of peek through the bushes, I think, but then keep going, because the trail ran pretty close, but you'd
Yes.
have to go and really looking to find it. Yeah.
I'd have to thank Glenn especially, and Esther and Barbara Cole. They're all here, and quite a few other wonderful art administrators who rescued the cabin. Once we got the notice of illegal trespass, it was a shocking notice from Port Authority, and Al had broken his hip the day before we were supposed to be there. We received the notice, and he was in BGH. So it was a kind of an awkward and sad ending there, but both Glenn and Esther and Barbara, you wouldn't believe the hurdles they had to jump through for about a year. It just seemed somewhat hysterical that there was so much opposition to saving it, you know. In retrospect, or maybe we're all one mind here, it had to be saved because it was a beautifully built place, you know, and the fact that it had to be moved is really sad because it fit in there solid. It just suddenly was starting to fit within the framework of the beach and the forest. But the cabin was then, you know, like remarkably restored by Jeremy and Sue Sporso, and it's now looking for a home, you know, and we'll find one very shortly.
Try Anmore.
I feel like,
Try Anmore. They lost a really beautiful Mom Murray house. They might just put yours alongside it.
where's Anmore?
Anmore, we don't know.
Across the way?
Tucked away near Belcarra. These are special people, and they're quite upset that they weren't able to save the Mom Murray house.
I think,
So
yes,
I
yes,
would-
and I think
I would
Glenn and
want-
Esther know about this
Yeah,
very
do that.
well. Yes,
it'd
yes,
be really
yes.
worthwhile.
Because initially, when it got so much publicity, there were phone calls coming in of people saying things like, oh, I have 5 acres in the seashell. You can have it for the cabin if you're in their place, you know. Or another phone call would come in. The generosity was just amazing of people who had, you know, places where to go. And then, like, you'd end up with these permits. But so many of you know these stories. The permit, how do you get it across a bridge, you know, or how do you even get it down a highway, you know. I'm not the one to tell these stories, but you'll hear from Esther and Glenn and Barbara 2 Thursdays from now. Is that right? Yeah.
Krista, what was it like for you to film the cabin living after all those years that you had?
Well, it was definitely sad. I was kind of expecting it to be this kind of rough thing. They brought these huge trucks and cranes, and you're like, oh, poor little cabin. You know, it was a really sad day. And then all the workers arrived, and it was just this really slow and respectful process. I couldn't believe how quietly and slowly they worked. And I was filming, and an hour would go by, and the cabin would move an inch. You could barely, it was like, you know, a flower blooming. And it was 3 full days before it actually moved faster than, like at a speed you could see once it's on the trailer. So they were just so respectful. I just thought, oh, thank God Carol's not here to see them if they're, you know, they're being rough with it and hammering away or something. They were just lift it up just slightly, fix it, center it, check their levels, raise it up a little bit more, and just, yeah, it was an amazing process to see. 3 whole days of lifting it on the trailer, and then it went. And that's the shot that you can see where it just disappears and down the highway it goes. So it was really sad, but it was also really happy that the cabin was going to a new home. So, but yeah, and then standing in the empty hole was very strange.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
Oh.
I just went and stood in the empty hole and looked around, and like, oh, this is very, very strange. Because it still held that presence of the cabin, even though the cabin was
like
gone.
using a limb.
Yeah, it was a ghost cabin. But you could really feel it, the resonance of the area, everything, the sounds, the birds, the trains. And it still felt like it was there. So I'm sure that's not the case now. I'm not sure what's happened. It's been
We went and saw it afterwards. What they've done to that site is,
just leveled.
yeah, it's you can see it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it was a really neat experience, and it just made me so happy that everyone had worked so hard to save it, because you're seeing it happen. It was an amazing moment. It was me and my new friend from the Globe and Mail that was there taking pictures, and we were there for 3 days, just at broad beach and water, and it was neat.
What happened to all the assemblages that were around the cabin?
What happened to them, Joe? Do you remember?
The two that were on the cabin, we have, are under the cabin now. But I think Krista has some of the other.
I have a few pieces stored away in case you...
I'm going to show you an image of the biggest one, and it's thousands of pieces. And I was 20, 25 years on it, off and on, and there was so much pleasure in making it, because I knew it wasn't going anywhere, or at least then I knew that.
Show us.
I think that just scatter. I think it's in people's backyards and under their outdoor porches and things. They just kind of drifted off.
Once it made it on the news, it seemed like there were lots of people came down this cabin.
And started
But
taking
it really was the thing.
Yeah.
There wasn't a big difference.
Yeah. So I had to accept that. Yeah. It's ego examining at that point. Anyway, I wanted to show you this one. Now, your sight lines are really bad at the edges, and if you want to come out, you can. I'm going to just talk briefly about each of these. This was done 2 years ago, and it's a collage that I put together. And it does give you the beach, for those of you who haven't been there, and it gives you the cabin. Oh, this is actually a color image. It's your pointer. It's in there somewhere. Isn't that lovely? I mean, this is how well fit the cabin was, and you can't quite see it. It's about that big on this scale. And this beach is the one where the films were made, and where I got to know the geese. And it's this shows you a detail of a larger assemblage that I have a color picture of. And I built, I think it's the year I turned 70. I was proud of myself, but I just took my time. These are 2 by 12s, but they're only 6 feet long here. And this is a new deck. And mostly making the underneath parts was difficult. I can't imagine the bulldozers coming in, because I used bolts this long. And tied it into the trees, sometimes the roots of the trees under there. So I don't know what they did.
They got a little surprise.
This is this boat is a boat that was stored here by the poet and scholar Maxine Gadd maybe 25 years ago. So we finally put it in an assemblage, and I haven't told Maxine yet. Someone said I should take a bottle of rye with me. But it's the largest unit in there. But this maybe gives you, can you move to the next one, and it will give you a, I did a drawing. Oh, and that's not the next one. It should be the site plan. This one? Yeah, I did a drawing. We should move the projector around the table. Just by memory, and this is the cabin here, and the outdoor decks were so essential to us. This is a catwalk, and there's the big outdoor deck that is made out of 2 by 12s, thanks to the shipyard when they weren't in captive. We got quite good at that. And here's the wood pile under the tarpaulins way up there. And the tide line I put in here, and this is the shoreline. It's the cabin's on pilings, and the shoreline goes around that way. And there's Maxine's boat up there. So I'm hoping to locate you a little bit in place. I don't know how you're seeing it all. It's good. Yeah. And I did this. It's a small drawing. It's amazing to see it so big. It doesn't have my name in it. It was just out of memory, because I thought better do it while I'm remembering it all. And the 14-foot tide that came in here. Oh, the tides were so important to us. I wish we as urban dwellers could see the tides somehow moving up and down, because the volume of water that moves through in an inlet like that, and it's maybe 17 kilometers long, must be huge, and it happens twice a day in and out. And on a really high tide would be a 16-foot tide, and that's only in the solstices, and then we might get water under the cabin, but basically there wasn't too much. There was a natural spring of some sort over here that kept it damp and grubby under there, but the ocean didn't come right into it. And sometimes I think the salt air helped preserve it all those years, you know, because it was very old. They used nearly all the same wood again when they restored it. Let's go to the next one, and I'll describe it quickly. Oh, no, that works, sorry. Beach assemblage. Yeah. So this is that same bowl, and this is the largest assemblage out there, and Al started it in the middle there prior to me being there, and then we worked on it together out this way, and it wraps around another 15 feet behind this cedar tree here, so you're seeing it's about 45 feet altogether. I paced it off, so I'm just guessing. And he and I worked together, and you know, it's hard for people to imagine, you know, that you know, we do something with each other, but we did, and this is a very steep slope. You can see ferns up there, and that's the base of Mount Seymour, and it just comes down like that. So I would scamper up there, and I'd stand behind these way up high. You see a 2x4 across. Tim put the extra one in, thank you, Tim, at one critical point. But, and I'd be standing up there, and he'd be shoving the item up, and he'd be saying, now move it just over this way, and I'd say, I can't get there, or something. And so the collaboration had a lot of yelling back and forth. I mean, we were getting along, but you know, there were these occasions when you couldn't quite fit things in because you were going up the trees 13 feet high, and this is sort of, I think it's the punctuation at the end. An earlier picture showed Al sitting in this alcove in here, and in that area. So it was a summer's job. I just worked slowly on it. This is a piece of mine that was originally called The Float, and there's a film made about it because Robin, you were there.
I was.
And that's dating us, isn't it? We floated this whole thing into the cabin in pieces, and I had a group of newly graduated performance artists from Menlo Park College. There was about 10 of us in wetsuits, and we floated this in over a day, and then piled it in here. So it just got built on and on. There was consultation between Al and I nearly all the time as this was being done. Like I'd go back in the cabin and say, I think maybe this should go there, and he'd say, yeah, but how about this and this? And so we talked like this a lot. And then came the time when he said, you know, you don't have to come in and ask me anything anymore, just go ahead. You know, and you know, I felt like I'd graduated or something. So I could just keep going. But it is and it's just called Beach Assemblage because it was the biggest one there. So, is there one more picture? Then I made a series of more recent collages. You saw the Dollarton collage number 1, which kind of located us. And this is the final one. And I want to read, there's writing below each of them because they tell a little story. Somewhere I wrote it down. This says Dollarton Collage 5 in Roman numerals, and in handwriting across the lower in pencil it says geese wedged carefully between the rafters of the cabin. These things are, in my memory, of the rafters. Rest before they prepare to lift off, and in interlocking formations raise the cabin off its pilings and move it away. So the center geese is me in my outfit, and the other geese, they're actually a repeat. They all look alike, you know. It's just the same set of 3 geese on both sides. It's not that I was not out there in my outfit. They came from a catalog or something. I don't think I'm going to do any more. I did 5 collages which sort of tell a little bit of the story of it moving out there. And I feel like I've reconciled myself with this one, with this imagination of all the geese jammed in there. And just, they're very powerful birds. You know, just taking off with it. I know it didn't happen. That way, I've got another little thing I'm going to read. Can you put the cap on it? I think now. When I was invited to come here, I thought, oh no, I don't think I can do it. And yada yada. And I thought, well, I've written about place somewhere in some journal, and if it's too much of a hunt, I'm not going to carry on. And the first journal I picked up, I found as a piece, and it's from 2009. It's certainly tells that Al and I were recluses. And this is on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2009. And I write, where are those expanses of time, those extended periods when I am guaranteed a lack of interruption, times I can take knowing in advance that it is secured as extensive, extended, long, lazy lapse when my focus does not wander into the dance of domesticity. Also known as the needs of others, the physical diversion of feeding the wood stove. What's on the stove, honey? Soup. Soup? Yeah, soup. Oh, I didn't know we were having soup. Just where is the meaning in an exchange such as this? Lunch is served. Observation of the beach and the trees through the binoculars. A man on the beach, puffing very fast on a cigarette, the other hand swilling a plastic bottle to his mouth. In a hurry. Sunglasses, fierce long stares in this direction, not looking in the easterly direction the way most people on the beach look. So he must be looking for something in particular. Is it this cabin? Is it the shipyard? Is it that he wants to visit here? Does he smell the soup? If he knocks on the door, then I will ask him how come he drank all his booze before he got here. And I answer, that would be very generous of you, always the epitome of generosity, even on Christmas Day. End of quote. There are times when this place is full, bursting with spiritual power. It has an oozing effect that is also exhilarating and uplifting. The ooze part may be my awareness finally centering on the place. I came here to be a slave to the place. I come in awe, place being so all-powerful that it can simultaneously embrace and exude its empathy and its needs. I can hear my mother's voice saying, well, if you're going to stay here, then do something. Who was hearing her mother, maybe it's our job, do something. And then I quote John Berger, when the intensity of looking reaches a certain degree, one becomes aware of an equally intense energy coming towards one through the appearance of whatever it is one is scrutinizing. End of quote. I like that so much. It's that give and take that so many people have written about in so many different ways. The guy on the beach is gone, likely stepping into the forest. If he's coming in this direction, then he would come to the door. There is nowhere else to go. That will be within 5 to 10 minutes. If there is no knock on the door, nor footsteps vibrating the wooden deck, in that frame of time, then he went the other way, back to his car, to the parking lot, to the highway, to his life. And this is a quote from me states in the film Inlet. And I say, we are defined in part by the sky, in part by the mountain, in part by the ocean, but mainly by the boat that moves through it. The usual, jump here, the usual doomsday stuff, that ubiquitous pounding voice that hollers between my ears, we're done for it, is the horrible letting go of hope. The celebrities, the festivals, the prophets, the rock concerts, all that music to our ears may just not do the trick. The trick being to save the world, our fierce and gentle planet. I mutter under my breath that the scenario has caught up with us, we who are the noble inhabitants, hypocrites all. So good luck with your perennial proselytizing. I can never say that word right. So good luck with your perennial proselytizing, because there's not much more being offered. Doomsday, the day of final and universal judgment, also any day of judgment. Destiny, fate, destruction. I go into these deep holes, and then I say I want to get smaller and smaller. And then a little bit from another part relates to it. Here it says, the awe of place, the cabin on pilings above the ocean, and a tsunami warning on a most southerly coastline forecast turbulence or the possibility of it here. So stay away from the water at 3 p.m., to quote from our national radio broadcasting station. Let it come. Let it be broadcast, but know also that this inlet is so well protected from the ravages of the Pacific Ocean that we are always and only safe. How is it that phrase vocalized? Oh, safe, as in old Canada. The national anthem, this was written during the Olympics. The national anthem seems to be the only song we know. A nation simultaneously brainwashed from grade 3 until perhaps grade 9 to memorize it completely. Did you hear people downtown singing it on the buses and as they walked around? It was just stunning to me. Do we know any more songs altogether? I don't know that we do. Learn your chops, boy. This is it. The mindless, insidious version of nationalism, which is only a borderline from patriotism, which is only a borderline from fascism, which is right next door to Nazism. And then I stop. I think I get into the Olympic Committee. I can ravage against anyone in here. I want to quote from Charles Campbell. Now, he wrote a story that's just come out, an essay maybe you could call it, that just came out recently in the Subterranean magazine, and it's incredibly well written piece. And I'm, so that I don't have to speak myself about my feelings toward Port Authority, let me quote Charles. I got permission to, I think, from my writing. If there is a counterpart to this story, and there he's referring to Glenn and Esther and Barbara for all the work they did and all the roadblocks they found as they did it. He says, if there's a counterpart to this story, other than our city's pervading indifference to its history, it's the Port of Vancouver, legendary across the region for its imperious behavior. I think that kind of sums it up. About 2 years after receiving the eviction notice, I ran into Ralph McKenzie of McKenzie Barge. He was maybe in his 50s then. We met and ran into him on Hastings Street, and I said, Ralph, you guys must have dealt with Port Authority a lot. You were there since 1929, and he said, yeah, and they're non-negotiable. So as a big industry, they knew that too. This is federal, and they have control of all our coastlines. So we're just nodding. Aren't we?
How many eviction notices did you get?
I wonder, yeah.
At least 5, I think.
Yeah.
That's,
Terrible threats.
yeah.
Yeah, one said, if you're not out of here by January 31st, this was November, we're gonna tear it all down and barge it away and then charge you for it. And Hal and I kind of looked at each other. He's in a wheelchair with his hip just broken. And he's yelling out, burn it all down, burn it all down, burn it all down, you know. And I'm saying into the phone, well, yes, I'm slowly moving things out, and I'll be out. I'm just using my cart, you know, and I kept dragging the scene on because they had a huge equipment on the shipyard at that point. The biggest, I don't know where they came from. I've never seen wreckers that big. They were bigger than the cabin, these machines, and there was 2 or 3 of them. 2 swipes, and the cabin would have been down. And I knew that they were phoning me weekly. They did kind of a wrap-up on Fridays. I probably looked through the computer and said, oh yeah, phone that, those squatters, you know. And I said, no, I'm still moving things out. There's still personal things I have to get out of there. So we stretched it out.
Well, then it was crazy that when finally got the money from Mondane and the
Yeah.
way to get it out of there, and you needed a license from Fort Metro, and it took them 3 months to give us the license.
Yeah.
This is after giving us like 6 3-week notices to get this removed.
Yeah.
We finally had a way to remove it, and it took them, I remember there was a bush by the cabin,
Yeah.
and they wanted an environmental assessment on their bush. And it was like, when you see what they did to that whole landscape, like they took like 6 huge trees out, this bush was nothing, but they had to do an environmental assessment, even though they were going to tear the place apart as soon as it got removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I wanted to ask, you talked a lot about the reclusiveness of Al Neal and, you know, shared some of your work and talked about the environment and the various forces and sounds in the area. But I'm wondering, are you able to point to any particular performances, interviews, or music of Al Neal, recordings and so forth, that he would say reflected what it's like in the cabin?
Yeah, I wonder. He didn't speak about it too much. It was our hideout. And whenever he did have press out there, he made sure they went in close to photograph him and the cabin because he didn't want it to be seen where it was. Because, you know, in all those years we had almost no vandalism, you know, virtually. And it was so amazing to see it the same each time. He didn't make any music called The Cabin or anything, but he had a piano there. And he played it half the night. I was honored to hear so much music. It was a piano, well, where's Pippa? She's restoring it right now. And it's going to take on its own magic as she does this to it. It was a really ragged piano. It was missing strings and certain keys, and he just worked at it. I mean, piano playing is a lot of shoulder work and back work, and he would just, when he finished an improvisation, he'd say, now I've straightened this piano out. You know.
Well, I thought I'd ask, and certainly
Yeah.
if there's any of the curatorial staff or anything that are aware of some things I'd love to talk
Yeah, it was his and my hideout, you know, and he was less active. I would say I was doing most of the stuff in the last 15 years there. I mean, it's romantic, but you're hauling water from a creek that's, you know, 30 yards from the cabin. I remember being 60 years old and saying, how long can I keep doing this, you know? And I thought, right away, forever, you know, we need water. And then there was the hauling of the wood in and the splitting of wood. So, you know, there was the labor involved in he didn't like the word squatter whatsoever because he had paid rent to the barge company for a while. $15 a month. And there were months when he couldn't find the 15, you know, it was really hard on him. And they just finally said, oh, now don't bother. It was so nice. They were really good people. Really good people there. And they kept this one piece of electrical wire that came into the cabin and would burn up in different places. And Al would put on his old clothes and dive into their, it was like a mud box where they kept all their big breakers for the shipyard, and he'd come home just back to the cabin just layered in mud. And I'd say, did you fix it? Like it was like just changing the breaker. And he'd say, yeah, so we'd either plug in the heater or plug in the 2-burner stove. So it was very basic living.
What was your very first step towards this idea of a settlement there?
A settlement?
Do you recall, yeah, just your sense. I see it as a settlement. You know, you came in as a settler, and I'm trying to get an understanding if you recall that moment or how it came about. What was that first thing? This is where we'll be in this place before it was built.
Yeah, I can't speak for Al, and he was there 10 years before I joined him there. And I heard a little bit about how he and his first wife managed to find it. Their house, little house in the West End had burned down, and they were desperately looking for a place. And that's how they came across it.
The cabin wasn't there, though, was it?
Oh yeah, the cabin's been there since 1929.
32.
32, yeah.
Okay.
The shipyard yard was just 3 years old.
So this was a settler.
We never used the word settler. No.
They weren't using that word.
No.
Homestead.
No.
In 1932.
Well, I wasn't there then.
Well, the reason I'm asking is I'm wondering about the indigenous side to this and where the bridging in the modern terms.
Because there's the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in between the cabin, the shipyard, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and then the mud flats. And I didn't see very much of them. Al was great friends with the chief. The chief and he, as young men, had been drinking partners, so they were buddies. It was haunting to watch them in their canoes in the summer when they were paddling through the inlet. You know, there was obviously going to be a big regatta, and it took you back centuries to watch this part of it. No, I know that Al got to know some of the young children quite well. This is before I was around, and they used to come over and I think use Al's hot plate and cook up a meal for themselves. Not a lot of activity.
Do you recall the chief's name?
Yeah, Leonard George.
Oh, Leonard.
He died just 3 weeks after Al. Yeah. This is Dan George's son.
Yes.
Did you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful guy.
And I wondered about the SFU professor there that was doing soundscapes at the time.
Murray Schaefer.
Yeah, did he become interested in, or was there any connection
No, I don't think there was. There wasn't, and I don't know why.
Yeah, the government is such a natural space to go and explore.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I'm going to read a story, and I feel really warm, heated. Sometimes I'm known where's Renee to pass out when it gets too hot. If I do, just pick me up and I'll carry on.
You want me to pick you up?
No, when you have the bookstore and during your reading, sometimes I just go down. You never pick anybody up. I'll pick up. Okay. And then this is the end of it. It's 5 pages. And I'm going to read it with expression. Diction or something. I squandered time by looking at water. Actually, I had to learn how to do it. As well, I was trying and failing to encompass the notion of nothing. I squandered time on the deck of a cabin on Burrard Inlet, some miles north of Vancouver. Looking became a major factor. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there you go. Looking became a major factor to learning, and while looking, how could I help but notice the geese? They arrived out of nowhere and were paddling parallel to the shoreline. You may have pictures of this. In unison with an awkward dignity, their full bodies waddled sort of sideways to the placing of each webbed foot, one after the other. I was privileged to have hundreds of private encounters with various gaggles of geese. They got the best of my organic wild bird food. At first, I thought that if they refused it, it could always be cooked up as porridge. They loved it. I learned some planned movements while distributing the handfuls of grain. The aim was to keep the competition between them minimum by how the grain was scattered. I'm going to give a little demonstration here. This was actually the bowl, the ones I saved. So I'd load up with grain, they were a long way away, and I'd go down and I'd go like this with the grain, and then I'd walk a few feet and put another big handful down, and they'd be slowly coming up the beach, and I'd go sort of in a semicircle around. And I wanted to make them, well, I'll explain it, I'll get ahead of myself if I don't do this. But it was kind of a pleasure to see how magnificent a bird they are. The aim was to keep the competition between them to a minimum by how the grain was scattered. Next, to keep myself safe from their occasionally aggressive movements. And thirdly, to let them stay as wild as possible. So the handfuls of grains were dropped in piles, laid out in a semicircle in the sand. This way turned out to be best because there would be less competition as they munched up the grains. They made a weird little noise as they munched, which sounded like tapu, tapu, tapu. They had their heads down at that point. And I being anthropomorphizing here, is that a word? I would think it sounds like thank you, you know. I greeted them with a hello, hello. That same sort of greeting you might give to a batch of long-lost relatives who have all arrived just as a surprise. The geese learned the tones very quickly. This cheery welcome to them always fooled my partner, Al, who was sitting in the cabin, always reading. It fooled him every time. Oh no, I could imagine him muttering, a bunch of people are coming. She is saying, hello, hello. This guy had two recurring nightmares. In the first, he is running and running away from something, and it is taking place overseas in the Second World War. Fair enough, he was there when he was 21 years old. The second recurring nightmare was that he would open the door to the cabin and a whole bunch of people would be standing there, none of whom he had ever seen before, and all of them telling him something about the cabin. This happened too. But these were a gaggle of geese. Hello, hello. The precision of their pacing seemed to be based on their hearing. They would halt periodically, and I finally decided that it must be to listen. How did they figure out who I was, standing so far away on the deck? I tried different hats, sunglasses, a change of clothing, but they always knew it was me. Usually they would not cross the beach if a second person was standing beside me. If a number of guests were sitting on the deck of the cabin, and those were rare occasions, the geese wouldn't even leave the water. Glenn, you have another memory of this, though. Yes, they did come down.
They did come down once
Yes,
when we were there.
yeah. I could never tell them apart. I couldn't tell male from female, nor could I tell if there were newcomers among them. It's said that to tell a goose's gender, turn it upside down. Something nobody in their right mind would ever try. Once or twice I noticed an extra large goose. Initially I would guess it was the male, only to look closer and see that all the bulk was in the lower rear end. So she was full of eggs. It has been observed that their incredible sense of community starts right inside the eggshell. Vocalizations between the nesting female and the young are exchanged at this point. The parents would bring the fluffy little ones, maybe a day or two old, to greet me, or so I first thought. This happened towards the end of March or the beginning of April. Quickly it became apparent that they brought the little chicks not to show them off, but because they themselves were very hungry. About this same time, the gaggles would clearly separate into two different sorts. The parenting ones with their fluffy ones, and the other full-sized ones who were not yet of breeding age. It is 2 or 3 years before breeding started, and I watched them for so many years. I saw this maneuver happening, and they acted as a decoy. This group of, they're not teenage birds, but they're young adult birds, and they would go off in one direction. And the parents, and there'd be multiple parents and multiple little fluffy things, would come in the other way, and they would counterbalance each other. No one ever gets near to a young gosling. The parents, as you know, are highly defensive, and it is said that their powerful wing stroke could break a person's wrist. They are big birds. They stand about this high, and their bodies may be this high. With their goslings about them, they are on guard for any predator on the attack. If an off-leash dog were charging towards them, the parenting geese would hustle the youngsters toward the water's edge, and they used vocal tones all the time they did this. It was an alert call. And simultaneously, these were horribly aggressive calls that they would almost shout out, and the auditory chaos in itself halted many predators. However, the little fluff balls were delicious mouthfuls for wilder animals. So this was an off-leash dog park at the same time as all the many shorebirds were here. Each day for the first week, this is when the little goslings are behind the big ones, there would be one less gosling among the 2 or 3 teams of parents. Only once I saw an eagle while the hapless family were out on the inlet. The eagle died straight down, and just like this, and the parents are here, and the little ones are along here. And they hollered, the parents, and the parents, their timing was incredible, because the parents went underwater, and then all these little fluff balls went underwater, just as the eagle's talons hit the water. They were amazing at doing this. And I don't know if you've seen these kind of things, but my heart was in my throat watching this, and thinking, the geese won. Getting ahead. Underwater rats sometimes attacked from below, and then where there were 5, suddenly there were 4. On some of the dog attacks, the non-parenting flock, who were separate but nearby, worked as a decoy team to lead the excited dog away from the geese families. The non-parents would tease the dog by coming in on the water almost within range of its barking frenzy, and then paddle off, their timing always precise. As far as I know, very few have ever observed the mating of geese. The various courtship rituals are apparent, but rarely the actual mating. For some reason, this makes me happy. Perhaps like many other shoreline animals, they mate partially underwater, and they wait for silence. It is a vulnerable position. When flying information, I'll get into the sound here, they use their various calls, we don't know this, to locate one another. We can hear that from ground level. But as well, their extraordinary hearing may mean that they can hear their own feathers rustling and filling with air on every wing stroke. Likely they hear the feathers of the geese most near to them too. I can't imagine this sound. Anybody ever heard of anyone microphoning them with microchips on geese? Can you imagine all those feathers filling up with air? Yeah. Airborne, they are fully feathered, self-contained, acoustically enhanced, and a virtually perfect flying machine, unable to be replicated. The most inventive of artists and designers and rich old guys have tried. The young mature in about 16 weeks. As an aside, this is phenomenal. They put on about 12 pounds in 16 weeks, and then they're mature enough to move. And they had then gained the necessary long wing feathers. It always looked more like practice than playfulness as the adolescent geese powered their wings across the water, never quite airborne. I gotta tell you what it looks like. You don't always see it. They're scrawny things. They haven't got their full feathers yet, and they're moving their wings like this on top of the water, and their big wet feet are working the water too, and they're trying to lift off, but they can't, you know. They do this for about 3 or 4 days, and you don't know what's going on until you say, they're going to lift off soon enough. You're nodding, Gail. You've watched this?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Your description sounds about right.
Oh, they're not playful, these young ones. Everything was done with a purpose. I found that extraordinary. Yeah. Once when I dumped one of these handfuls of grain down, the little ones would come up, and they liked it too, you know. And one of them came up and ate for a while and just passed out right on the grain. Had a sleep, you know. That story over. Then came the day that each and every one of them could fly. A whole group would abandon the beach for the remainder of the summer. Initially, I was dismayed that the organic grain and my cheery hello had little to do with their instinctual necessities. This is the last page. Their departure coincided exactly with the nearby stream drying up, usually in early August. Once they disappeared completely, I could go back to watching the water and stop doing the procedures with the handfuls of grain. The water's surface perpetually changed. Sunlight, wind direction, cloud cover, underwater currents, tidal changes, schools of miniature fish. Take a big breath here. The wake of gigantic oil tankers slapping up onto the beach. I was absorbed by the fluttering little lamps of sunlight way, way out on the water's surface. You've probably seen these kind of clusters, huh? They were surely an illusion, the way they would come and go. Binoculars never clarified what was actually happening. I would use only one lens of the binocular, sort of like this, and with my other hand, I'd focus with my eye on a piece of paper. I was just going to draw them, whatever they were, you know. I was so intent on drawing an illusion. I was not learning by any means the art of nothing. Could I paddle a rowboat out to them? Why did they all stop fluttering and then begin again, like a small musical ensemble somewhere else on the inlet's surface? How does one draw a sparkle? Thank you. You want to evacuate fast. And there's a bar with water and soda water too, and folks to look at. And thank you, Marlene.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Carole. Thank you, Krista. That was wonderful. Thanks. So great to have you guys here. And thank you all for coming. There is water, if you like, by bar. And there are also catalogs. We have exhibition catalogs, posters, and if you're interested in receiving the newsletter, please sign up. There's a form out there you can leave your email address. Thanks again, you guys. That was really great.